Hi there, I'm the _Twig and I like analysing game rules. When I play D&D, I am almost always the Dungeon Master. I'm the infamous Forever DM. In fact, in my entire D&D career, I think I've been a player in exactly one long-form campaign, with the entire rest of my playtime being either one-shot or mini-campaigns, which are only designed to be a few sessions long. That is to say, I have a lot of experience running games. I also homebrew almost everything. I write my own adventures, I create my own magic items, and importantly for this video, I designed my own monsters. With the new books coming out at the end of this year and early next year though, this has caused me to hit a bit of a snag. I have essentially no idea how to analyse monsters and magic items. With the exception of really basic stuff like a +1 sword or a wolf, I haven't used or read any DM side WotC content in probably about 5 years. The last DM side material I read was Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes in 2018, and even then I basically only skimmed it looking for interesting stuff like the Star Spore. So today I figured why not look through some monsters and do some good old-fashioned React content. I've bought Bigby Presents Glory of Giants, Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse, and the Book of Many Things. That's a bit over 160 monsters, and I'm just going to read through them. I highly expect quite a few of them to be fairly boring or repetitive, so I am going to cut a fair few out. If you only want the standouts, I'll also be putting in video chapters which will take you directly to the most interesting things, so feel free to skip around if you don't want to watch this full, probably multi-hour video. Finally, at the end I'm going to do a general summary of my findings. Yo, post-reading Twig here, and oh my god did I find some crazy stuff. Even if you don't have time to watch through all of these monsters, please at least watch the conclusions and especially the Statistical Analysis section at the end of the video. First though, I want to show off some of my own monsters, just to explain why I make them and what I'm hoping to see from WotC. First up are these guys. They're probably some of the most powerful monsters I have, and they support me on Patreon. They have a bunch of different abilities, like seeing this video early, joining my Discord, and in this video, one of them even asked me to specifically look at their favourite monster. This video was also a multi-week production, so they got to follow along with my findings. Of all of these guys, I'd say that the most powerful one is probably SK, who has the additional ability to compel me to say his name when I do a Patreon read. Right, actual stat blocks now. So these are two of my monsters. Silbix the Mother's Snake and Acromire the Death Dragon. These aren't the original stat blocks that I used in the game. I've neatened them up a little bit to make them easier to read and added back the bits that I kept in my head. We'll go through Silbix first. She's a monster I made in probably around 2020, and she's actually one of my all-time favourites. The idea behind Silbix was that she would be the final boss of a dungeon guarding one of the 5 MacGuffins. All throughout the dungeon she would watch the party, commenting on what they were doing and goading them. And then at the end they would fight her called around a massive stone bridge over a pit of stalagmites. At this point the party were, I think, 6th level, and had a composition with fairly mediocre offense, but probably the highest defense of any party I've ever DM'd for. These stats were designed to result in a battle around 7 turns long, assuming that the party went head to head with no special tactics. What I actually wanted the party to do though was to attempt to destroy the bridge, dropping Silbix into the stalagmites and insta-killing her. That would then lead to a puzzle of how to cross the chasm with no bridge, and another puzzle where they needed to get Silbix's fangs out of the chasm because those were the keys to the final door. To encourage this, I gave Silbix a thunder vulnerability. 2 members of the party knew Shatter, so the moment they realised Silbix was weak, they started to cast it, which would start damaging the bridge, giving away the alternative win condition, assuming they hadn't already spotted it. Vulnerabilities are one of the things that I really want to see from WotC, by the way. I think that they are a really fun mechanic, and are much more likely to make players try different damage types instead of just finding something that isn't resisted and then sticking with that. Some other things worth noting about on this stat block are the Spells, Indomitable, and Super Boss. Spells first. I can never be bothered with spell slots or giant lists on my monsters. I typically only give them a main option, in this case Guardian of Nature, and a secondary option, Fear. On the subject of Fear, I run a nerfed version which just gives the Frightened condition. It doesn't restrict your actions. I would never give a monster an ability which outright shuts a character down. Super Boss is a feature that I often give to solo monsters or those that I want to be particularly powerful. Silbix has Super Boss 2, so she rolls initiative twice and gets 2 turns. From experimentation though, I've decided that it's a bad idea to let Super Bosses get back their legendary actions more than once around. Finally, Indomitable. So I really dislike legendary resistance. I think it's just an intensely dull and ham-fisted mechanic. I do want my bosses to have better resistances though, so instead I give them a recharging Indomitable. That lets them reroll a failed save. Silbix starts with 3 uses and regains 1 use on her first round each turn. Like with legendary actions, having this recharge more than once a round is generally not a good idea. Now let's look at Acromire. I made Acromire relatively recently. He was designed to be fought in his lair in the swamp, where he would summon a bunch of zombie minions to fight alongside him. For story related reasons, I also wanted him to be able to hide himself in fog, which is what this Fog Flower ability is all about. That also lets Acromire fly in, attack and then fly away again, like he had the Owl's Flyby feature. One member of the party was a Paladin, and he had very few options for fighting a flying enemy. That meant that I wanted the party to be able to force Acromire onto the ground, and so I came up with this idea of Fragile Wing. My players really like describing how they attack, and in particular what part of the enemy they hit. I reward that by giving the monsters weak points. Whenever the ranger targeted Acromire's wings with Sharpshooter, they had about a 20% chance of immediately knocking him out of the air. The sorcerer could also either max roll or crit a fireball, which would do the same thing. When Acromire falls, he takes double damage from the fall, thanks to this vulnerability, and then the paladin was able to use the biggest smite of his life against a prone, bludgeoning and radiant weak monster that also let him add the extra undead die. That was like a reward for having to sit back killing zombies while everyone else had fun fighting the dragon. Overall, Acromire was designed to be an unwinnable fight if they couldn't get him to land. But if they could, then the paladin was able to do about half its health in a single round. Now, some of the odd stuff on here. Indomitable is the same as Silbix, except because Acromire doesn't have Super Boss, he can recharge every turn. Fog Breath has a recharge 3. That doesn't mean that it recharges if he rolls a 3 on a d6, it means that it recharges after 3 rounds. I like to have a bit more predictability and control when using a monster's strongest features, rather than always relying on dice. I think that on monster side there can be a bit too much variability. More interestingly though, danger actions and threshold actions. A danger action is a mechanic I use on a lot of monsters, not just bosses. I even use it on terrains, and I've used them in social encounters before. They're kind of like lair actions, but they bring a lot more tension to the table. At the start of combat, I open roll a die, and after that many rounds, something happens. The players don't know what, they just know that something is coming, and it will probably be bad. In this case, 6 more zombies get summoned. These are of course not the CR 1/4 zombies from the monster manual. They're quite a bit more threatening than that. Afterwards, I roll another danger die, and the party have another d4 turns before bad stuff happens again. My players love this. It's really exciting and encourages them to hunker down and be defensive on the turn that the danger action is set to go off. Finally, threshold actions. These are basically when a monster drops in HP, a thing happens. In Acromire's case, when he falls to half health, he commands all his zombies to attack whoever he finds most threatening, and also sets up a death fog aura. Also, when he dies, all his zombies die too. There's loads of uses for threshold actions, from tactical maneuvers like this one, to new forms, and even escape attempts. So I think that that was a good show of why I make my own monsters. I can design something for the exact scenario and party that I am running. Nothing in the monster manual would be able to push the party into destroying a bridge instead of fighting directly, or reward them for forcing the dragon to fall. That's because WotC are designing for everyone, whereas I'm just designing for myself. They need to make monsters that can fit any setting, I only need to look at my own. As such, I'm going to limit what I'm looking for in these books. I'm not looking for them to replicate Silbix. I think that what I'm looking for ultimately comes down to one overarching target though. I want to see monsters which reward the party for fighting smart, whether that's through a vulnerability, some sort of tactical decision which needs to be made, or having some unexpected mechanic or ability that the party need to research. I'm also pretty interested in how they're going to design generic Mook enemies. For any of you who are unfamiliar with the term Mook, it means the sort of mid-dungeon monsters. Things like goblins or orcs, which are meant to use up the party's resources before the boss fight. Mooks can be especially tough to make exciting, so I want to see how WotC do it. So then, welcome to my first ever piece of completely unscripted, unprepared content. I'm here on D&D Beyond, and I'm looking at all these monsters. So there's quite a few monsters here that look like they've been reprinted from the Monster Manual or the DMG or other books. I'm not going to look through these, I think I'm only going to look through the Planescape, the Bigby Presents and the Book of Many Things monsters. Looking through older monsters isn't really achieving what I want out of this video, so I'm just not going to bother. I've got these sorted by CR, going from lowest to highest. I think that a lot of the lower CR monsters are probably not going to be too interesting, so I might skip forward through a few of them. But I will look through some. For example, I think that I saw a giant child here, which I'm a little bit interested in. Why are they putting children in a book? But we'll see. So this Sunfly looks like it's more of a background monster than anything that you're likely to fight, but I guess that would be expected for CR0. These upper, neutral and lower plane things are quite fun though. I especially like the neutral plane one. Okay, it looks like WotC agree with me that they shouldn't have put giant children in a monster. It's telling you to avoid them and that it raises abundant moral questions. In that case, why have you included the stat block at all? That just makes very little sense to me. So I am familiar with the cranium rat from, I think it's in Volos. These are quite a fun little creature, and the squeaker looks like it's added this shared telepathy feature, which lets another creature use its telepathy if it's holding it. I think that's pretty interesting. It encourages players to try and befriend the monster rather than to just straight up attack it. I don't think that it's especially useful for monsters to talk to other monsters, because I mean I would just let them do that anyway in a game. I wouldn't try and justify it by using a cranium rat squeaker instead of just giving them telepathy. But this is alright as a little inclusion. I'd quite like this. This Minotaur Archaeologist is actually quite nice for a generic character that you don't want to use the standard Commoner or Soldier stat block for. Maybe because you want them to have the skill proficiencies or something like that. I reckon that if you just got rid of Labyrinthine Recall and reflavoured the gore and the fact that it's a Minotaur to something else, then this would probably be quite useful. So this Giant Lynx is another standard beast stat block, except it's a Fey. The claws seems to have basically the Panther's Pounce feature, just sort of built into it, which I think is probably better than having it as a separate feature up here. Woodland Camouflage is pretty useful, I guess, and I actually quite like Lynx's sight. Clairvoyance is a pretty fun spell, and having that accessible by the giants or whatever you're running these with could be a lot of fun. So the next monster is the Vargouille Reflection. I was actually specifically asked to look at the Vargouille by one of my patrons, Tom, so I'm going to do that now and then come back to look at this reflection afterwards. So the Vargouille is a monster from Monsters of the Multiverse, which is a book I don't have. As such, I asked Tom to send me over a photo of his copy. I really like this Abyssal Curse feature, that's awesome. The fact that it's quite a slow process is really cool. It allows the party to try and do something about it. I would be a little bit worried about using it immediately before the party go to bed or while they're out in the wilderness, just because, say it's a fighter who's dumped charisma, that's only 8 hours to do something. But if I was using this, then I would probably have something around to help them remove the curse, maybe at a cost, maybe they need to do a favour for the local cleric or something like that, but that's a really awesome feature actually. Stunning Shriek, I'm a little bit less fond of this one I think. The fact that it stuns everyone is, I mean I don't like shutdowns. I think it's alright because it's only one turn, but it's... shutdowns aren't nice for monsters to have I don't think. I'm not entirely sure why it recharges, given that as soon as it's used, everyone becomes immune to it anyway. So this here Vargouille Reflection is fairly similar. It still has the Abyssal Curse feature, which is the fun feature, and it's got slightly better stats and magic resistance. It's also replaced the not so good Stunning Shrieks feature with a single target feature that does 3d6 psychic damage and then frightens a single target for an hour concentration. I think that this one is actually a lot better than the original Vargouille, so I would probably pick this over the Mordenkainen's one. So now I have the Swarm of Sunflies. These are the CR0 monsters that I liked earlier. They still have the whole plane thing, including the neutral plane one that I quite liked, and they've got the Swarm stat block, which is always a really nice thing actually. I'm not fond of this Dazzling Lights feature. This is another one that stuns, but in this case it's for 1 whole minute. I would not want to be using that at all. It's an AoE stuns on monsters. Why would you give that to a monster? You want your players to be able to play the game. The Razorvine Blight here is a really quite fun monster actually. I used to use Blights quite a bit in my early campaigns, back before I started homebrewing monsters, and I quite like them. They're quite good as sort of early game Mooks, which is always a really important thing. I think that this one fits the early game Mook vibe quite well. Razorvine Blight would probably go in sort of a big group with a lot of other Blights as maybe a leader of them. The Life Draining Vines feature here is pretty nice. It's an AoE centered on self, and it also heals it a little bit, which means that it effectively has 36 HP, not 27. That's decent for a CR1 sort of group boss. So the Quadrone Detention drone, I don't think this one's very good. I'm not a fan of Modrons at all, really. I just don't particularly like the lore behind them. Not that I especially care about lore, but I don't really like the lore behind Modrons anyway. And with the higher level ones, the fact that they get so many attacks is just not good. On the Detention drone specifically though, this Detention Orb feature basically just says, oh, you failed a DC 15 con save, you don't get to take part anymore, like, ever again. Why would you put that on a monster? I don't get it. It's... You want your players to be able to play the game. Come on, people. So this Harrow Hawk is quite fun, actually. They effectively get the Shadow Monk's teleport, where it can teleport between dim light and darkness, and also gets advantage on its next melee attack, which does 2d4 plus 3 plus 1d6. That's a decent offense, actually. Plane shift twice a day means that it's got a fairly good escape option as well. I kind of wish that this had a language, actually. Having a language would mean that it would be a really good way of sort of giving information to the party, or exposition or something. So this here is literally just the Cheshire Cat. Why is the Cheshire Cat in a book? I mean, if you really want to play Alice in Wonderland, then here's a stat block for you. But, I mean, Alice in Wonderland's way out of copyright. You could just call this the Cheshire Cat. There's no reason not to. It's quite a good social encounter stat block, actually. I mean, I guess that's what the Cheshire Cat is, but yeah, you could use this to sort of give some exposition. I probably wouldn't want to use this as in a combat encounter, just because, I mean, there's more interesting things that you could do. The Harrow Hawk, for example, was much more interesting as a combat encounter than this. But yeah, this is... I mean, I don't think this is bad, actually. The fact that it gives out its whiskers to Misty Step, that's pretty cool, actually. It's basically a Misty Step scroll vendor. So this giant ram reminds me a lot of the Flail Snail, which is a monster that I used to use quite a bit, and I'm quite fond of Flail Snail, actually. It's got the same sort of spell reflection thing going on. What I would absolutely ignore, though, is this bit at the bottom about the Cloak of Protection. I'm not allowing my players to just fight a giant ram and then make a Cloak of Protection. You're not getting that without my direct permission, and if I wanted to use this monster just because I like the features of it, I'm not also giving you permission to have a Cloak of Protection. So Oddlewin here looks like they're a named character. The Nilbogs themselves are quite a lot of fun. I really like them. The Nilbog trait itself, it's basically an upgraded Sanctuary. Oddlewin here seems to be slightly stronger than the standard Nilbog. I think they've got less than 10 HP. And Oddlewin also has essentially an at-will Cloud of Daggers, which, I mean, Cloud of Daggers, it's a spell that doesn't get enough use, I think. So this Minotaur Infiltrator would probably be quite a good boss against a group of maybe level 3 or 4 characters. The enlarge, and these are quite good attacks, are pretty fun. Prone condition is always good. I'm a big fan of prone condition, much better than the stun condition. And the damage is quite high, especially when it's enlarged. Yeah, that might not be great for 3rd level characters then. Maybe you do want to do this on 4th. If you're going 4th though, you definitely need to boost these defences. Those aren't good enough. I'm not actually sure where this goes as is. I think it needs a little bit of messing with. But it is a fun idea in concept. Right, that's the end of page 2 of Monsters, and I haven't seen a single vulnerability yet, which, I mean, I can't say I was hopeful for it, but I would still really like to see some vulnerabilities, guys, please. Vulnerabilities are fun. So, Dabus, this one has something going for it. I really like physical restraint. The fact that it can't make melee attacks at all means that there's a real benefit towards going up into melee combat, because that will give the Dabus disadvantage on all of its attacks against you, and means that it can't really do anything. That's a really, really nice feature to have. It's what I get. It's what I was saying earlier about giving monsters some kind of abusable weakness. The actual stats itself, though, I mean, this flying brick kind of sucks. It's not good. Grasping ground is decent. Restrained is a good condition. It's not like stunned, where it just stops you from doing anything. You can still do stuff while restrained. You're just not as good at it. So this feature's quite nice. But the damage sucks, the AC is awful, hit points are low. I'm really, aside from the fact that it's got this physical restraint feature, I'm kind of disappointed with this, and I think that it's honestly a massive waste of this great feature here. Okay, Transcendent Order Instinct. It's a monk. It's just a monk. The only thing of note here is that this is the first case of this reactions text here. Something that I have heard is that many legendary monsters, instead of having legendary actions, they get multiple reactions. This is a feature that I honestly think monks possibly should get themselves. I think that having multiple reactions on a monk would suit it really well. But I'm not sold on the idea of monsters only ever getting this yet. It could be interesting, but as I say, I'm not sold yet. Right, this one's really cool actually. I like this Mud Hulk a lot. Difficult terrain is a fantastic condition to give to any monster. In this case it's got both an aura and it can throw difficult terrain and make a target area into difficult terrain, which is, both of those are really good. Enveloping Slam is also pretty interesting. This is another one that restrains rather than doing anything much worse, so you can still do stuff while you are restrained by it. It also does persistent damage, which is a lot of good. And yeah, this Mud Hulk is just generally pretty fun. What I would like to see on this is some kind of vulnerability. I'm thinking possibly fire, because you would be sort of baking the mud. That could be good. Maybe give it something like the difficult terrain disappears when it takes fire damage. That could be fun. Okay, we've got a Harrow Hound. Now I really liked the Harrow Hawk, and this one also gets a teleport, bonus action teleport. It's also called Shadow Step, but it doesn't require any darkness, so I mean, it's slightly more powerful. This one has a recharge though. I don't think that the Harrow Hawk did. What I'm really impressed with on this stat block though is Supernatural Tracker. This one's just like, wow. The the Harrow Hound knows the distance and direction of any creature that's come within 30 feet of it, like, ever. That's an amazing villain ability. I would absolutely give, like, a pack of these to any necromancer or anything like that wants to hunt down the party and kill them. Yeah, these guys are great. So, I think that currently my favourites are the two Harrows. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm just going back over the Harrow Hound and the Harrow Hawk, and these are amazing minions for any undead monster or necromancer, or, I mean, you could also just make them anything other than undead, and they would fit in really well with most villains. These guys are great. Yeah, loving it. Harrow Hound does have BPS from non-magical attacks, get rid of that, but other than that, these guys are awesome. So the Harmonium Peacekeeper has this Electrified Man-Catcher ability. These do a fair chunk of damage. It's not fantastic damage by any means, but it's alright. And they also do Grapple and Restrain, which is great to see. And it also does a bit more persistent damage every turn, and prevents teleports. That's a really, really nice set of combo. These guys would work quite well as Mooks. Yeah, I like them. So this Githzerai Traveller is a slightly stronger version of the Githzerai Monk. I think that the Gith tended to have a bit of an issue where they didn't really have enough variance at low levels. They had quite a few at sort of the, I think it's about the 6 to 10 range, but only a few at lower levels. This one has this nice feature, Matter Manipulation, where it can choose one of these things and it's got a 50% chance of recharging every turn. I think that the Astral Step is a great little escape option. Growth, because it's only one turn, I can leave that. And Retaliating Light, it's Spike Armor. I like Spike Armor. Spike Armor's really fun. Having once per day self-only plane shift. That's interesting. I think that this replaces, I think the Githzerai Monk got shield actually, which I'm not going to complain about not having shield. Plane shift is a good sort of escape option though. Right, we've got the Giant Ox, and it's just a Giant Ox. It does nothing interesting at all. I'm not really sure why all of these giants are Fey. This one in particular, the only thing that's non-beast-like is the fact that it understands Giant and Sylvan. But then you've got like the Giant Eagle, which can speak, and I think the Giant Elk can as well. So I'm not entirely sure why they're making them Fey. So Brucifer is another named character by the looks of it. She can summon, I think these are demons, are they? Yes, they are demons. And she also has this other interesting ability here, Incite the Hunters, where any ally that has Unerring Tracker gets to make a free weapon attack as a reaction. I had a look up of Unerring Tracker, and it looks like this is a feature given by creatures with the Blessing of Baphomet. So that's interesting. I guess Brucifer's meant to be like a cult leader or something. Having a named character who is a cult leader is, I mean, that seems pretty interesting, I think. You could build off of this, yeah. This is the end of page 3. I still don't think I've seen a single vulnerability, which I'm still not too happy about. What I have noticed though is that they appear to have agreed with me that spellcasting should just be like basic options rather than giving a full list. Like, this is a creature here that I think if this was in the PHB they would have given it like a bunch of spell levels and all sorts of random stuff that just isn't really necessary. So I much prefer this model, personally. Right, next up we have Werevulture. A new were, that's good. I like wares. This one has regeneration for 10 hit points, Regeneration is a good feature. I like it a lot. I put it on quite a lot of monsters myself. Although, when I put regeneration on a monster, I give it vulnerability to the damage type that turns off regeneration. So, yeah, I would put a radiant damage vulnerability on here. The other feature here that I am very not fond of is this beak feature. DC 13 con save will be cursed, and if you drop to 0 HP you just become a Werevulture under the DM's control. Yeah, no thanks, take that away please. I don't want to be turning my party just immediately as soon as they drop to 0 HP. If this was like, oh, after 3 moons, if it's not been removed, then they turn, fine, but just immediately as they drop to 0 HP? No thanks. Okay, Mind's Eye Mattersmith is a fairly standard mediocre monster until you get to Magic Shield. What this says is the Mind's Eye Mattersmith has permanent 20 AC and spike armor. That is ridiculously high for a challenge rating 4 monster. I mean, I will admit that I do quite like Crucix. I have had a lot of fun with Crucix in the past. My players hate them, but this, I'm not sure about this. Herald of Dust Remnant is another spellcaster Mook. This one is probably the best one that I've seen so far. They've got Bane, which is a great spell for monsters. Web is not bad for monsters. Dimension Door's a good escape. And then they've got fairly good AC for a mage, and Phase is basically, it's Stone Skin. Oh yay, another monster with Detention Orb. Same as I said the last 2 times, get rid of it. Hands of Havoc Firestarter basically has Searing Smite built into its attacks. Something that I really like actually is just this line right at the bottom. Yeah, it's got this ranged weapon, the Havoc Flask, and every time it throws one it rolls a d6, and on a 3 or lower it runs out of flasks. That is so much better than having to keep track of, say, oh, it's got 4 flasks or whatever. This is really good. So the Fate Hag is the first proper legendary monster that I've seen. This one has legendary actions. I wasn't actually expecting to see that. I thought that they were replacing all of them with the sort of multiple reactions thing. That's pretty interesting to me. Of these legendary actions, we've got a teleport, we've got a speed reduction, and we've got a curse that makes all rolls have disadvantage. All 3 of those are pretty good legendary actions. They're all sort of movement or debuff related. The attacks that it has are also pretty good. It gets 2 attacks, can replace 1 with a spell, and its Shears attack gives disadvantage on all attack rolls. I mean, that has sort of anti-synergy with the Destiny's Curse, but it can sheer attack one enemy and then Destiny Curse the other, which, I mean, that's pretty cool. The spell options that it has, Bless at will, fantastic. It's got Bane, Silent Image at will is also great. Yeah, this is a pretty good monster actually. It's got legendary resistance, I would replace that. It also doesn't really have a weakness of any kind. As I've said many times, I like my monsters to have a weakness, so I would want to put that on here. Since WotC, I think by now I've realised that they don't want to put weaknesses on. I think that this is a fairly good stat block for sort of a low level, sort of a low level mid game boss. So this Ruin Spider is kind of like a cross between a Rost monster and a giant spider, and I think that it's important that it's CR5. The Rost monster is something like CR1. It's really low, And I think that's actually a problem, because at that level, not many characters will have magic weapons, magic armor, and permanent -1s is, I mean, that's really, really bad. On a CR5 though, most characters will at least have a magic weapon, and if they don't have magic armor, then the Ruinous Bite here is actually quite a strong, sort of maybe mid-dungeon encounter. This is very... The penalty on this is very, very damaging, actually. Especially if the characters don't really have a way to go and repair afterwards. Right, we've got a Rhyme Hulk now. There's two things that I quite like here. First up, this Death Burst. I'm a big fan of on-death effects, especially if you can have multiple of them in the same encounter. On-death effects, they really encourage players to be careful about when they kill things, which I think is a fun tactical decision. The other one that I quite like here is this Trail of Frost. This is a lot like the Fire Elemental, I think, has something like this. And, I mean, movement-based abilities, those are cool. So the Furbolg Wanderer, this one's pretty cool. This Bewitching Bolt ability gives the Charmed condition. Something that a lot of people forget about the Charmed condition is that if you are charmed while in combat, you can't attack your charmer. So if the Furbolg Wanderer hits you with this, then you can't attack it back. Another really good one is it's got Dispel Magic. That's always good to have on a monster. I'm not so keen on Tasha's Hideous Laughter though. That can be... well, it takes you out of the game if you're hit by it. The really cool bit though is this Dupliticus movement. Basically, it gets an illusion that it can switch with as a bonus action at any time. It can move it and then switch. It basically means that the Furbolg Wanderer is sort of immune to opportunity attacks, and is also really confusing to fight. Alongside the Bewitching Bolt, that makes it really, really tricky to target this effectively. Fated Shaker is up next. This has two things that I find pretty interesting. First up, Suggestion. Suggestion is a really fun spell to give to monsters, because players take Suggestion a lot differently than monsters do. When a player uses Suggestion, then you're trying to get the monster to do a thing for you. When you use Suggestion on a player though, the player still has control of their character. They try and do as much as they can to comply with the Suggestion in an unintended way. So that's a really fun one to give to monsters, just to see how the players will deal with it. The other cool thing here is this Commanding Words. This is like a super buffed up command spell. It does extra damage, it's a bonus action, and it's got either the Grovel or the Cower. Right, so this Dust Hulk has another Death Burst. This time it actually blinds rather than doing damage, and I like that a lot more, I think. Blinded is a really good condition to give to players because it heavily restricts what they can do, but doesn't outright stop them from doing anything altogether. The air form also means that it can enter creature spaces, and when it does, it's got this Stinging Dust ability, which means that it can do a little bit of damage and also blind them. This is single targeted though, which I don't quite get. I feel like it should probably be anyone in its space. That would really try and discourage players from ganging up and coming together in a big group. Okay, this Cranium Rat Squeaker Swarm looks almost identical to the Volo's Swarm of Cranium Rats, except it's got this Psychic Messenger feature which gives it the Sending spell. I quite like the Swarm of Cranium Rats. They've got Dominate Monster, which is actually a fairly good spell to give to monsters. Unlike other out-of-the-game spells, Dominate Monster you can still give the player control of their character. You just tell them, right, you've now got to fight the other players, and that can give some nice sort of PvP action. Okay, Ambitious Assassin. This is a legendary creature. The defences on this are fairly low for a CR5 legendary creature. I've done some calcs, and against a party of 4 baseline warlocks this says it's appropriate for tier 1 play, so I went for level 4. So 4 level 4 warlocks can down this guy in probably about 3 or 4 turns. That seems... I mean, that doesn't seem very strong to me. Offences wise, it's also not especially strong. In the 3 or 4 turns that this thing's going to be up, it probably does about maybe 1.5 players max HP. It's not great. This seems fairly weak for a legendary creature. I would imagine that if you were including this as a boss fight, then you would have the Ambitious Assassin and a load of minions around. But at that rate, I'm not entirely sure why this is CR5. It does have some layer actions, and these are pretty good. I especially like the Distraction, which just forces a Constitution save on concentration, DC 15 rather than the standard 10. And there's a few other things here which, I mean, it's traps and things. So yeah, overall, it seems a bit weak for a CR5 legendary creature. Right, Mist Hulk. So this is another one with a Death Burst. In this case it does a little bit of damage and prones enemies. Prone's a great condition. Air form, again, it can go into other creature spaces. And in this case, it has this Hideous Wailing, which does a DC 14 whiz save. You have disadvantage if you're in the same space as the Mist Hulk, and it does a little bit of damage and then incapacitates you. Incapacitate, don't give that to monsters, please. I would really like this feature if it just made you like force drop concentration, but since it's full on giving incapacitated, that means that like you can't even take an attack action. That's just no thanks. Fensir Skirmisher. I've checked and there are 2 fences. As before, I'm going to do them together. So this one has regeneration for 10 HP, turns off with acid or fire damage. As before, I'd probably give it a vulnerability to acid or fire, and maybe like bump the HP a bit. It does, however, have sunlight hypersensitivity, and this is great. When it enters sunlight, DC 15 con save, or it's immediately petrified. I really like that. That's going to give the players a lot of fun trying to trick them to come into sunlight. Great, absolutely excellent. This Mud to Stone feature I also actually quite like. This is an out of the game feature. It gives the petrified condition, but it's the petrified condition for 24 hours. Now that's a really interesting one, because it means that you can sort of capture the party and then take them somewhere else. It's a way of taking them out of the game in order to create story development. So actually, Fensir Skirmisher I'm giving a pretty solid mark to. Fensir Devourer is the other Fensir. Again, it's got regeneration and sunlight hypersensitivity. Sunlight hypersensitivity is still fantastic, really good. It's also got this boulder feature, which has the same mechanic from earlier, where if it rolls a d6 lower than a certain number, then it has run out of boulders. Really good, means that you don't have to track ammo. The Death Curse I'm sort of two-minded on. I quite like the idea that when you kill it, it curses everyone around it. It's also a really quite punishing curse, no resting, and you take damage every hour. The downside of this is that this can just randomly kill you. If you fall to 0 HP because of a death curse at the end of the hour, then you must roll death saves. And if everyone's cursed, then everyone goes down. No one can like throw you a healing potion to get you back up. That could be like a completely unintended TPK. I would probably try and avoid that as best as I can. I'm not sure the best way of doing that. Maybe you just have it go, you immediately go to 0, but you can't die from it, maybe? I don't know. In concept, really like it. The damage is possibly a bit risky. Echo of Demogorgon, I don't really have all that much to say about this one. It's got fairly poor defences. Damage is alright, magic resistance. The only really interesting thing is this confused reaction on Discordant Screams. DC 13 Wiz save, or you have to melee attack another creature of the Echo's choice. That's going to be one of your allies, I guess. This thing needs a vulnerability or something. Some way of like targeting it down. Okay, this Eater of Knowledge is a really cool sort of returning villain. It's got plane shift all the time, so it always has an escape option. That's really important on a return villain. And it's also got this really threatening combination where it can slam you twice, causing you to be stunned until the grapple ends on the slam attacks. And then it can do 45 damage to you on 10d8. That's huge. And if it kills you, then it eats your brain and powers up. This is a really good one to use on some NPCs and then fight the player. The only thing that I don't like about this is access to Hypnotic Pattern when it's eaten 4 brains. Hypnotic Pattern obviously does the incapacitated condition, and that means that Extract Brain is active. I'm not a fan of that. That's basically encouraging you to Hypnotic Pattern a group of people and then have the Eater of Knowledge just walk around, extract brain on everyone, and then walk off, plane shift away, it's done. Yeah, that's not happening on my game. So get rid of Hypnotic Pattern. Everything else about this, really good repeat villain. Okay, it's the next day and I'm just going back over a few of these monsters again, and I've realised what this Echo of Demogorgon is actually supposed to be. So it's CR6. When I first saw that I thought, oh, you're supposed to fight it when you're around level 5 to 7, but actually I think that you're more likely supposed to fight this around level 11 as a high level Mook. If you do the maths on this really low armour but quite good attack, it goes down in about a turn against a level 11 party, and in that turn it can probably do about slightly under half of a character's health. That is actually quite good as far as Mooks go. In the low levels you would expect goblins to do something similar, so this is effectively a high level goblin. I think that's a pretty important creature to have actually. Doomguard Rotblade. So like the Echo of Demogorgon, I think that this is meant to be a sort of mid-high level Mook. It's got much better defences than the Echo had, but its attacks aren't quite as strong. It does have this fairly interesting effect of effectively perma-killing anyone that it kills with an attack. However, I very rarely will kill people by attacking them while they're down. Anyone who dies normally dies from failing a death save, so that's unlikely to come up much against the party themselves. The fact that it has a sort of an AoE, whether it hits or misses, kind of like the Ice Knife spell, that's pretty interesting. So this Troll Mutate is kind of like 4 stat blocks in one, depending on whether it's an Elastic, Psionic Mirror, Spellscarred or Winged form. If it's Winged, it gets 30-foot fly, fly speeds, good to put against your party every so often. If it's a Spellscarred one, it gets magic resistance. I mean, it's a fairly standard feature. If it's an Elastic one, it gets to squeeze, or it gets reach on its attacks. Reach on attacks is a lot of fun on monsters. It means that you can sort of kite quite effectively. But my favourite one here is the Psionic Mirror, which gets this Psychic Rebuke feature. So one of my all-time favourite monsters, in fact probably one of my 2 favourite monsters, is the Starspawn Hulk, which gets basically just this feature. This is an awesome feature. It leads to so many really cool combos. Put something with psychic damage against the party alongside one of these, and you can basically turn the Troll Mutate into sort of a nuclear bomb. It's a really awesome feature. So the Talon Beast is another sort of high level Mook. I really like this one actually. Low defences, again, probably good for a Mook. The really interesting feature here is this beak attack. Every time it pecks you, you need to make a DC 15 chast save, and if you fail, a spell on you just immediately goes down. No concentration save, it just goes down. and if you don't have any spells on you, then one of your magic items just becomes deactivated for a minute. That's a really cool feature. Maybe you have a group of these Talon beasts and then some boss, and the Talon beasts go in, they take down all of your spells, they deactivate a random selection of your magic items. It's really hard to fight the boss now. Woo, a detention drone. You already know what I think of these guys. Right, we've got a Githzerai Uniter here. I like Gith. It's good to have a CR7 one. They've now got a fairly good range, I think, for it, from 2 to the mid-teens. I think there's one at almost every CR. I did notice actually that this one's an aberration. I feel like most Gith are humanoid, so I wonder if the previous one was an aberration too. Just checked, yes it was. So this Githzerai has Psychic Defense for decent AC, and it's got this really good pacifying touch feature. So this basically just says you can't do one of these 3 actions. I quite like that actually. Normally I don't like features that shut down actions, but because this one shuts down one specific action, you can work around that. Maybe if the Githzerai Uniter goes after you and shuts down your cast a spell action, you instead go in and you dodge and become a sort of a face tank. That could be a pretty good use of this feature. Okay, now we have this Fire Elemental Myrmidon. This one has quite good defenses for a CR7, although its offenses leave a little bit to be desired. Only +7 to hit, 3 attacks, and they do 7 damage. It's not great. It does have this Fiery Strikes, which does a little bit more damage, but it's a recharge 6 feature, so I kind of feel like this should just be on by default. What I'm more excited about is this Water Susceptibility feature. This just says every time it moves through water it takes a little bit of damage. Unfortunately, when I say a little bit of damage, I mean 1d4 damage. It's got 123 HP, guys. This is doing almost precisely nothing. So what I would do with this is I would pump up Water Susceptibility to maybe something like a 3d12, make it like impactful. And then, as I say, put Fiery Strikes in as default. If you do that, you've got a really, really powerful monster with a huge weakness to just like being in water. That's a fun monster. Right, Cinder Hulk is another Hulk, so it has another Death Burst. In this case, it makes sort of a cloud of slightly damaging smoke. This is good. It's almost like a cloud kill, although it's slightly weaker. I like this sort of effect. Obscurement is good, and doing a little bit of damage in an AoE when you die. Fine, yeah, I'll take that. It's also got this Wave of Cinders feature, which is an AoE that blinds. Yeah, great. Detention. Drone has Detention. Orb. It's a bad feature. Please don't put this in your game. Okay, Transcendent Order Conduit. It's a monk. Unarmed strike, multi-attack, and it's got effectively a stunning strike here or a push. What I really like though is 3 reactions per round but only once per turn, and don't be there. If it would be in the range of a saving throw, it can just move without provoking opportunity attacks and potentially just get out of the range. That's like great, yeah. Yeah, can I play this monk please? Right, we now have this Harmonium Captain. So, first thing I notice here is 20 AC. That's high. That's very high. Even for a CR8, I don't really like giving things much more than 18 normally. So the feature that I'm most interested in here is this Dictate. This is kind of like a triple targeted command spell, which lasts for a minute. So I have 2 thoughts about this. First up, yeah, triple targeted command, great. Command's a great spell to give to monsters. The downside of this though is that it lasts for a minute. Now you do get out of it early if you complete the task, but if it says something like lie down on the floor, then that's 1 minute of you lying down on the floor and you can't do anything else. That's not fun, so I would probably... I like this feature, but I wouldn't use it for anything too powerful, because you could just ruin the fun of the players with this. Hexaton Modron. So first up, I cannot tell you how glad I am that this thing gets 3 attacks and not 10. If it had 10 attacks, that would just be like, oh my god, completely unreasonable. Those 3 attacks are tentacles, so they are automatic grapples, always fun. What I also quite like is it has at will Dispel magic. So it's really, really hard for spellcasters to get anything up against these things. I could imagine an encounter where you've got a few different creatures, including one Hexaton Modron, which just goes up, dispels whatever the spellcaster does. That's really fun. It means that you've got to target down this Hexaton Modron before you can do anything else. Yeah, like this a lot. Okay, so that was the end of the 6th page of Monsters. And I just want to go through my findings so far. So first up, a lot of monsters seem to have this thing where they do a little bit of one damage type and then a bit more of a different damage type. I think that that's pretty interesting. It means that they're sort of getting around resistances. I'm not sure how much I like that, given that the only real instance of resistances is going to be the Barbarian. And you kind of want the Barbarian to have resistances. Yeah, I'm not sure about this, but it's an interesting thing. I've also noticed that a lot of the monsters that do have automatic just you're out features have fairly low saves on them. Like DC 14 Wiz, that's perfectly doable by the level that you're fighting a CR8 monster. Something else that I thought was fairly interesting is almost all of the CR7s were Mooks. Like high level Mooks, but they're still Mooks. My favourite one I think was the, where's it gone? It was the Talon Beast. Yeah, this one. These are all monsters that are going to go in just to waste resources more than anything else, so that when you get to the boss, you're going to be low on stuff that you can do. It's going to be more challenging. I think that's quite interesting. I wonder why it's CR7 though. Like, I feel like there should be a bit more of a range. Another thing that I've noticed is that on these CR7 monsters, a lot of them have fairly poor AC. Going back to the Talon Beast again, 14 AC. There was one on page 7. It was the Echo Demogorgon, yes. Again, 14 AC, really low HP. Yeah, so this I think makes a lot of sense. These things go down quickly, but they can do a decent amount of damage while they are up. It means that you're burning through your resources, the characters are then unlikely to go down from this Echo Demogorgon or any of the other CR7s and things around that nature, but it's dangerous enough that they're going to want to heal up between fights. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, Solar Bastion Knight. So this is another one with 20 AC. As I've said, I don't really like going that high. I don't really have a ton to say about this guy, to be honest. Its Sun Spear is fairly powerful, to be honest, although it does only have +8 to hit. Solar Flare is effectively, I think it's a lot like the Light Cleric feature, and then it's got a few sort of random spells, nothing particularly interesting. What I do want to point out though is this bit down here, customise this stat block, then just give us more stat blocks. I'm sorry, but the only reason that I would be using stat blocks is if I want to use the stat block. I don't want to be told to customise it. Okay, this Lightning Hulk's pretty cool actually. So I'm going to go with the action first, Lightning Arc. So this does a little bit of damage on a +9 to hit, but interestingly it turns off reactions until the start of the creature's next turn, and then jumps to another creature on a DC 18 dex save. That's pretty high for a dex save. The thing that makes this super interesting is this Lightning Form feature. This is effectively walk through other creatures and do a little bit of damage when you do. So what this monster can do is it can arc lightning a creature, walk into its space, walk back out again. You can't opportunity attack it because you can't use your reaction, and then it can go walk through another few people and do a load more damage to them. That's pretty damn interesting. Right, now we have Gremorly's Ghost, and Gremorly is clearly a named character. There's a lot of description about him down here, but I actually super like this stat block. So the first thing I noticed was AC 12 and 82 hit points. That's really, really, really bad for a CR 9. What's going on here? Well, it's got incorporeal movement, so what I immediately thought of here is go down into the ground, no one can attack you, on your turn, come back up, attack someone, go back down, no one can attack you, come back up, attack them, and just keep on repeating that. It's really, really hard to damage Gremorly. Then I saw this Fell Necromancy, which is a 60-foot range, DC 16 con save, or takes 61 damage, 78 plus 30. That's, like, punishing. And also, Gremorly then regains a little bit of HP. And importantly, this is slightly more than the damage he takes from incorporeal movement ending inside an object. Really, really good. This guy's going to go down, up, basically infinitely. So you're going to need to use reactions and prepared actions to attack him. Unfortunately, he has slow, and that means that you can't use reactions. So Gremorly's going to cast slow on everyone, go down, and then keep on attacking with Fell Necromancy until somebody gets out of slow and starts using prepared actions to attack him. I'd like that a lot. I'm not too fond of possession. Possession features, I mean, you can still give control of the character to the player, but possession, there's very, very few ways that you get out of possession. It's like 2. So this is less good than earlier we saw a Dominate Monster spell, which I like a lot more than possession. So overall, if you ignore the possession feature, I'd like this monster a lot. I can imagine you setting up Gremorly with a few like zombies or something. That'd be a lot of fun. Githzerai Futurist. So this one has a few interesting spells here. It's got at will Dispel magic, and it's also got slow. Now we've just seen slow on Gremorly, and I didn't really talk all that much about slow. I super like slow on monsters. It's a really, really crippling debuff, but it doesn't actually restrict what players can do. It just makes them worse at doing it. That's really, really good. I see it as like a big brother to like the poison condition. Dispel magic, I've seen this on quite a lot of monsters actually, and I think that that's fairly interesting. It looks like they're trying to give more ways for monsters to sort of shut down what spellcasters are trying to do, which, I mean, I quite like that. Obviously there's the whole martial caster divide thing. I personally think that that is a little bit overblown. I think that the martial caster divide is significantly less potent than people seem to claim it is. A lot because of magic items giving martials a lot more power than it really looks like on a optimized character sheet. But the fact that they're giving so many monsters spell magic makes that, like, this is really, really good for the martial caster divide, so I'm a big fan of this. Fraternity of Order Lawbender. So this frat boy has Dispel Magic at will. This is another one with Dispel Magic at will. I've just talked about that. I like this a lot. Unfortunately, it has this Power of Authority. DC 16 int save, take a bit of damage, and become incapacitated for a minute. Don't like it. It can also do this with its multi-attack. It's like, oh my god, guys. I would just get rid of this. What I do find interesting about this multi-attack though is that it gets to make 3 attacks and then use spellcasting. And one of those can be Dispel Magic, so it can do a load of damage and then Dispel Magic, or do a load of damage and then cast Fly on something. That's pretty cool, actually. So, ignoring Power of Authority, I like this guy. We're now onto the Ferromac Rilmani. So the Rilmani look like they're a group of 3 monsters. I'm going to do them all together again. This is another one with Dispel Magic. I've mentioned this a few times now. I really like to see this. It's making casters a lot less powerful, which is good. It also has this quite interesting Bladed Edges and Skewering Charge combo. Bladed Edges says that you take a little bit of damage if you're grappling it or it's grappling you, and then Skewering Charge means that if it runs at you, you have to make a strength save or you are automatically grappled. That's a pretty nice little interaction, I like that. The other attacks on this are fairly mediocre though, like +8 to hits for 9 + 11, 3 times a turn at CR9. Alright. But yeah, this Bladed Edge, Skewering Charge, that's a nice little thing. The Kupralak Rilmani is fairly roguelike. They've got Uncanny Dodge, they've got Dash or Disengage as a bonus action, or they can make another attack as a bonus action. And their attacks themselves are actually fairly similar to the Ferromak Rilmani. The thing that makes these pretty interesting is At-Will Disguise Self. That's a pretty fun thing. It's less fun on a monster than it is on like a warlock, but it's still interesting to have. Okay, the last Rilmani is the Oromak Rilmani. This one seems like it's more of a ranged spellcaster than the others. So it's got Slow and Suggestion, both really good spells to give to monsters. It also has Geese, which is like, oh my god, that's an awful spell. But, okay, Slow and Suggestion, good enough. Then it's got a few just sort of fairly standard attacks. They are slightly more powerful than the other Oromaks. And then it's just got some generally boosted stats. The bonus actions over here, Aura of Blades, I don't really get why it's on this. This requires it to be a melee, so I mean, I probably wouldn't end up using this other than just like putting it up so that it's up. I don't really get that one. Invoke Weakness though is kind of like a one-use single target like Hex or Hunter's Mark type of thing. Just do an extra 27 damage once. I mean, fine. I think that the Oromak is probably my least favourite of the Rilmani, but I could still see myself using all three of them in the same combat, which could be interesting. Oromak sits back and uses Slow and Suggestion to control the party. The Ferromak can run in, grapple people, it can dispel magic, whatever the spellcaster's trying to do, and the Kupralak can run in, do a bit of damage, disengage, get back out, allow the Ferromak to tank with its 18 AC. Yeah, these guys are pretty cool. I could use these all together. That's nice. I like it when you can use all of the same sort of group of monsters in a single combat. The Ceratops is a big dinosaur. Yay, big dinosaur. People like big dinosaurs. I mean, great, okay. I don't really get why it's a monstrosity with magic resistance. Like, that doesn't really say much to me. There's like none of this description down here says anything about magic. That just seems a bit weird. I would probably just make this a beast and take out magic resistance. I don't know why it's there. So, Boss Delor is obviously a named character. Looks like he's a were-rat, which is pretty cool. I like wares. Really interestingly, he has regeneration based on a silver weapon. That is not something that every party's going to have. It could be fairly interesting to put Boss Delor up against the party when they don't have anything. They will be completely unable to kill him. But I wouldn't have him kill them in return. I would just have him use Cunning Action to get away. Oh yeah, he's also clearly a rogue. Then the next time that the party find him, they'll have to have worked out that they need a silver weapon to kill the were-rat. Makes sense. That's a pretty interesting idea. It means that you've got a way to sort of have a repeat villain and encourage the party to go out of their way to find special equipment. Good monster. Malephant. So this one would be quite a good CR10 Mook. It's got low defences, it's got a decent attack that grapples and another one that does a decent amount of damage, but it's got this Mind Poison feature, which does a fair chunk of damage and then poisons you, and while poisoned you lose all weapon and skill proficiencies, you can't cast spells. That's so punishing, like oh my god, that's punishing. This is probably a bit too much, I think. If it only had the Barb Trunk of the Glaive and maybe this just did damage and poison normally, that would be cool. Because it removes all proficiencies in spellcasting, I don't like that. I think that this bit down here should probably just be removed, but other than that, I really like this monster as a Mook. Frostmourn has a damage vulnerability to fire. Finally we have one. Thank you WotC for at least putting one in the book. Other than that, which automatically puts it to top tier, it has this freezing touch attack, which is pretty interesting. If you would go to 0 HP, you would instead go to 1 HP and become petrified. I actually don't mind that. This addresses the yo-yo problem of players going down and then getting healed and coming back up and then going down again and getting healed and coming back up, and it means that you can't do that. You also thaw if you take fire damage, which is pretty interesting. I do wonder how players would learn about that, but you could probably do like some investigation stuff, some lore, work out that, and that would be a pretty interesting way of doing it instead. However, if you take bludgeoning damage, you die. Yeah, no thanks. Get rid of that line, and Freezing Touch, really good attack. Icy Axe is just a standard melee attack, and then Polar Ray is kind of like Ray of Frost. Slightly more damage, but you get reduced speed. That's fun. Finally we have this Blizzard Escape, which is a reaction kind of like what the Shadar Kai has, but in a reaction form. It gets resistance to all the damage, and then gets to teleport. That's pretty good. Yeah, remove the thing about bludgeoning damage, and actually Frostmourn is pretty fantastic. I like this monster, like, a lot. I'd say that this is up there with Harrows for me, and the Cheshire Cat. So this Fomorian Deep Crawler is pretty cool, it's very thematic. It has this crawling stance feature, which means that it will basically always be prone, but you don't get advantage on it, and it doesn't cost it extra movement. So you can just have it go up in prone condition, then stand up, attack you, go back down prone. That's pretty nice. It also has this crawling hex, which I like a lot. DC 15 with save, will take a bit of damage, and then you're prone and you can't stand up for any reason for an hour. You don't get any further saves either. That's very cool. Prone is a good condition because it only gives reduced movement and disadvantage on attacks. I like this one a lot actually. Yeah, this is a good monster. Okay, so now we're on to the Fire Giant of Evil Fire, which is frankly a terrible name. Like, couldn't this be Fire Giant of Evil Embers or something? Just don't put fire in the name twice. This guy has another Death Cry, in this case dealing 21 on a DC 18 deck save. Fine. It's not the most exciting Death Cry, but it's Death Cry, those are good. It also has two attacks here. The first one, Searing Scepter, is a lot like Branding Smite, and then the second one, Bolt of Imix, is kind of like a ranged Wrathful Smite. Those are both alright to have, I don't mind that at all. So the Darkweaver is pretty good. It's got Sunlight Hypersensitivity, so when it's in sunlight it takes a little bit of damage every turn, and it also has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. But even more, when it's in darkness or dim light, you have disadvantage on attack rolls against it. That's pretty cool. It also has this Shadow Web feature, which says that it can grapple up to 6 creatures at 120 feet, but they can break out by attacking the webs that it grapples with. They have 28 points, 16 AC, and vulnerability to radiant damage. That's nice. Unfortunately, the Darkweaver itself does not have vulnerability. Just give this thing vulnerability, excellent monster, really, really good. But it doesn't have that, so it's okay, I guess. The Aerosaur is another monstrosity dinosaur, for whatever reason. So this thing has fairly terrible defences for a CR10, and that says to me Mook, and sure enough, plus 12 to hit is huge for 27 and 24 damage. That's pretty decent for a CR10. I think this is really quite a good one for putting up against a pretty high level party in maybe a little gang. The Wing Gusts feature is also fairly interesting. This is a sort of a push effect that also does a little bit of damage and prones. Even on a successful save, you still get pushed a little bit. The Octon Modron is another one with at-will Dispel magic. I think that all of the Modrons so far have had that. I kind of wonder why the Modrons are now going up in CR as they get lower numbers. That's not what they used to do. They used to go up as they got higher numbers, so that seems a bit weird to me. The interesting one here is this Whirlwind of Tentacles. It's a recharge 5/6 ability, pulls in every creature within 20 feet and then makes 2 tentacle attacks against all of them. That could be very powerful actually. Right, so this Hierophant of the Comet I quite like. It's got this all-consuming star feature as its main thing. 20-foot radius sphere, it blinds and deafens you while inside. Those are good conditions. And you also need to make a DC 17 Wiz save or take a little bit of damage and become incapacitated for a turn. Incapacitation is an interesting condition because it locks down all actions and bonus actions and reactions and everything like that, but does not lock down movement. That means that even if you fail your save, you can still run out of the 20-foot radius sphere. But the Hierophant of the Comet can use Star's Hunger to try and pull you back in. Again, it's a DC 17, but in this case it's Strength. I like this actually. It's not locking you down permanently, but it has a consistent way to one-turn lock people. The Frost Giant of Evil Water has a much better name than the Fire Giant of Evil Fire. The main feature that this thing has is this Harpoon. It's a ranged grapple, but while grappled your speed isn't reduced, you just can't move away from it. That's pretty interesting. It's more like a taunt or a reversed frighten. You also take some damage every time you attempt to escape. I kind of wish that this had something to do with this reel in, maybe that made the water it was in cold, so you took some damage while moving through it. So this Fire Gauntlet looks like it's meant to be sort of a fire giant zombie, I think. The Fire Blood feature is spike damage. Spike damage is always good, and it's also got this Heated Maul, which has a sort of a smite-like effect. Crimson Rays is a big AoE attack that also does persistent damage. I quite like persistent damage, I play with it a fair amount. The only thing that I think this really needs is some sort of weakness. As always, I love a weakness on a monster. Right, Fire Hellion. So the main thing here is this Soul Taker. When you reduce to 0 hit points, you just immediately die. You don't get any death saves or anything. Not a fan of that, especially because this Morning Star also means that you can't regain hit points until the start of its next turn. I quite like the Morning Star effect, but that in combination with Soul Taker is just, don't like that. I'd probably just remove Soul Taker, I think, because Morning Star alone, good. The other thing that it has is this Infernal Orb, which is basically just at-will fireball, except it does half its damage in necrotic. That's pretty good. The Faratsu Demodand is the first of 3 Demodands, so like always I'm going to do them all together. This one has boundless movement, which basically means that you can't reduce its speed in any way, including difficult terrain, and also Summon Demodand, which is an awfully written feature. Like, this is genuinely quite hard to read. In effect, it has a 40% chance of cloning itself. That's interesting enough. Does has once per day Dispel magic, good, and a few sort of generic attacks. This one does grapple though. So this Kelubar Demodand also has boundless movement and once per day Dispel magic, as well as Summon Demodand again, although in this case it can summon either 1d2 Faratsu Demodands, which is the first one, or 1 Kelubar Demodand. Interestingly, it's also a flyer with spike armour. That's a pretty rare combination. It also has a Spit Acid, which is kind of like a slightly weaker acid damage lightning bolt, and Nauseating Fog, which is effectively Stinking Cloud on a bonus action. That's pretty effective actually. I quite like this one, and it works fairly well with the Faratsu Demodand, which is poison immune. So yeah, you could have the Kelubar sort of spit from afar and use this Stinking Cloud, and then the Faratsu run in and start grappling people to keep them inside. And Shator Demodand is the last one. It's got boundless movement, once per day Dispel magic and summon Demodand again, in this case 1d4 Vargouille, 1d2 Calabar or one of itself. It also has a few other pretty interesting things. Liquefaction Ritual is very fun. This basically lets it have a bunch of Vargoulles and Calabars all around it, sort of hidden in flasks, which it can then turn into Vargoulles and Calabars again using an action. That's a really good sort of surprise ambush attack. The Jailer feature basically gives it imprisonment once per day, fine, and then it's got this inhibitory spray. I don't like that. This is a 1 minute paralysation. Not a fan. It is a line, so okay, but still, paralysation for a minute, no thank you. Right, so overall, I think I quite like the Demodands, as long as you ignore the Chateau's inhibitory spray. The Chateau has a lot of other interesting stuff going on, like this numbing secretions, which I didn't mention before, and the Calabar and the Vargouille have a lot of combinations, as I mentioned with this Stinking Cloud effect. The Chateau Liquefaction Ritual is really just the cherry on the cake. This is a super fun ambush feature, I like that a lot, and yeah, I would happily use these in a campaign actually, as maybe some kind of big villain to fight at the end of an arc. The Enchanting Infiltrator is a legendary monster which is just generally hard to pin down. That's its main feature, to be honest. The Cunning legendary action is probably the best one. It immediately moves without provoking opportunity attacks and ends grapples. The only other really good one is Misdirecting Escape. This makes it invisible and then it teleports after creating an illusory duplicate which also attacks. Fun if the party don't really know what to expect, because they're then going to go and attack the duplicate and wonder why they can't do anything. The other interesting thing about this is this Beguiling Whisper. So this is a stun, but it's only one turn, and then after you've recovered from the stun, you are immune for 24 hours, so it effectively only works once per fight. That is exactly how you should do a stun. I like that. Outside of this, it's nothing really to write home about. I'm not too inspired by the Enchanting Infiltrator, to be honest. Septon Modron. As can be expected by now, it's got Dispel magic at will, which can be used as part of its multi-attack. It also has this Lightning Network feature, which is an AoE that does a bit of damage on a dex save and then stuns for a minute, and you already know what I have to say about that. Don't, please. Stuns for a minute. Bad. No. This one has 4 tentacle attacks, which is more than every other Modron, which has had 3 so far. So I think that we're just starting to scale up a little bit. Right, Hill Giant Avalancher. So the thing going on here is this Hill Rune feature. This is basically a thing that it has, kind of like a magic item, and if you take it away or you destroy it, then the Hill Giant Avalancher loses some of its abilities, namely this Stone Avalanche and this Hill Rebuff. The idea being there that you should attack the Hill Rune or try and steal it or something to make it weaker so you can then attack it just head on. Unfortunately, I don't think that really works, because this Stone Avalanche and this Hill Rebuff are honestly the least powerful bits of the Hill Giant Avalancher. It's got Wall of Stone, that's a far more powerful feature. It's got Legendary Resistance, that's just, I don't like Legendary Resistance, but it's really strong. It's got a much stronger Great Club attack than this Stone Avalanche, although Stone Avalanche I guess is AoE. And then it's got this Stone Bolus, which is awesome. It's a Save or Sark DC 16 dex save, which restrains until the Giant's next turn, and also deals AoE thunder damage. That's really cool. So, whilst destroying or stealing the Heal Rune, really nice idea, I think that it should probably do more than just this. So this Fomorian Warlock of the Dark is effectively an immediate improvement on the Hill Giant Avalancher. Rather than the Hill Rune, it has the Blood Rune, which is essentially the same thing. Destroy it or take it away and it can't use 2 of its features. This time those features are Poisoning Rebuke. Every time you try and attack it from within 60 feet you have a chance of becoming poisoned. and Corrupting Hex, which is a DC 16 Charisma save, where you take a little bit of damage and become cursed for 24 hours. That curse halves your speed, and every time you try and cast a spell, you need to make a DC 16 int check, or the spell is wasted. That includes losing the spell slot. That is a potent feature, which means that the Blood Rune is a high priority thing to steal. Other things that it has are this Eldritch Burst, which prones everyone around it, and it also has Telekinesis and Suggestion. Suggestions are a lovely spell to give to monsters. Hexaton Modron is basically just you don't get to cast a spell ever again. It has at-will Dispel magic, as all of the Modrons have, and Counter Magic, which is basically counterspell that it can use 3 times around every single round. That's getting... that's possibly too much, especially since it also has 4 legendary resistances. This is basically making spellcasters feel like they can't do anything. I think this is probably too much. Yeah, not a fan of this actually. Shemeska here is a named Yugoloth and also a cute little fox. She has this Fel counterspell, which is effectively a 5th level counterspell, although because it's just a reaction and not an actual spell, you can't counterspell her back. Also, whenever she uses it, the caster gets the poison condition. There's no save on that, it doesn't matter if she succeeds or fails on the counterspell, the caster just gets poisoned. That's like, wow. Her multi-attack is pretty interesting. She can either Arcane Flux or Spellcast and then Claw or Razorvine Tiara. That's important because Razorvine Tiara here gives a disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws. This means that she has to Spellcast and then Razorvine. She can't Razorvine, give disadvantage on saving throws, and then use Suggestion. The Arcane Flux feature is a single target within 120 feet, DC 18 dex save, and if you fail, you get incapacitated until your next turn. That's fine. 1 turn incapacitations I don't mind. The spells though are fairly Suggestion's fun, but she then has Banishment, oh god, no thank you, and Mind Blank is... it's kind of just, why is it there? Right, I've skipped quite a few monsters that you just haven't seen, and I'm just going to pause on this Regisaur because it suffers from the same problems as all of those. All of these monsters that I've been skipping have been Mooks. They have fairly okay defences, fairly okay offences, but nothing especially interesting going on. The thing that makes them just not work as Mooks is that they've all been like Gargantuan. That just doesn't work on a battle map. You can't really have a group of Gargantuan monsters sort of crowd around a battle map. It just... if these weren't Gargantuan they would be fine, but that's just ruining them. So Hulgaz is another named monster and she has some pretty interesting stuff going on. I'm going to start with this Brimstone Vapour. So this is a recharge 5/6 AoE, and whilst within the AoE you make a DC 17 con save or become poisoned for a minute. While poisoned you take some persistent damage and has disadvantage on wisdom saves. That's important because of Intoxicating Sting. This has a DC 17 Wiz save to become charmed. While charmed of course you can't attack Hulgaz. Hulgaz can then also charm you using her legendary action to cast Charm Person. Whilst in combat, you normally have advantage on the Charm Person saving throw, but if you've been hit by Brimstone Vapour, you don't. Finally, Hulgaz can use Curdle Heart as 2 legendary actions, which ends the charm condition on everyone charmed by her, but makes them take 5d6 damage. So essentially Hulgaz's entire thing is repeatedly charming and then dealing psychic damage to people. That's pretty fun, it's a nice little cycle that she's got going on here. Aside from just having a really cool name, the Breath Drinker is a really interestingly designed monster. So I'm going to start with multi-attack here. The Breath Drinker has 2 Enervating Claw attacks which grapple and also reduce hit point maximum, and then it can use Drink Breath. this basically says that if it's grappling something or it's got an incapacitated enemy, then they have to make a charisma save or they take some necrotic damage. Their charisma score is reduced by 1d6, that's very punishing, and then the Breath Drinker also regains some HP. So, it's got 2 attacks here that both do necrotic damage. So what you're going to do against it, you're going to do radiant damage, except it's got radiant absorption. It heals from radiant damage. It's a big black thing that heals when you do light to it. On the other hand, it has a vulnerability to necrotic. So, this thing is effectively just subverting expectations. Massive black thing, reducing hit points, doing charisma score damage. Immune, in fact, heals from radiant and takes extra damage from necrotic. Wow. Yeah, I like this one a lot. This is one that I would probably have go up against a party, threaten them a lot, and then go invisible and run away. Then, very threatened by this Breath Drinker, start trying to study it, realise that it's got this radiant absorption and this vulnerability to necrotic, and then can take it out on the second run through. The Grim Champion of Pestilence is a fairly generic legendary monster. It's actually got very low AC and fairly low hit points as well. The thing that really kills this for me is this Halo of Pestilence. This is a DC 18 con save, and if you start within 10 feet of it, you just become incapacitated for your turn. That's just really, really boring for any like paladins or melee fighters or anything like that, without affecting spellcasters and backliners at all. Yeah, not a fan of that. The Troll Amalgam looks like a massive missed opportunity. It's got this fling limb bonus action, where it literally rips off its own limbs and then throws them at people. This is really, really cool in concept. If it hits, then the creature is then grappled, and they take some persistent damage while grappled. They're also restrained by it. Unfortunately, nothing then happens to the troll. I would have thought that if the troll was trying to throw its own limbs, then it would like have reduced speed, or maybe couldn't make as many attacks or something. So the more times it uses this, the weaker it would get. That just doesn't happen though. That's like the one change I would make here. Other than that, it's a really good Mook. It's got high 2 hit, only okay damage, and it's also got regeneration 15 HP, and it only turns off properly if the amalgam takes 20 or more acid or fire damage. That's pretty cool. Right, so that's the end of the 9th page of Monsters, and I'm starting to see a bit of a pattern here that I don't really like, and it's all to do with Bigby Presents Glory of the Giants. So, everything's huge. Like, everything is huge, or some of them are gargantuan. The monsters are too big guys. You can't put multiple of them on the same battlefield very easily. Yeah, can we not? Thanks. Right then, it's been a few days since I last recorded. I got incredibly bored of all of the giants. They are so many of them, and they are almost identical. I've probably cut like most of them because they're really boring. I then got rather busy at work, so yeah, I'm back now though. And we're starting off with the Otherworldly Corruptor. This is for levels 11 to 16, and it's a legendary monster. I quite like this one actually. Starting off with this Alien Mind, it's a 1-minute stun, but it only triggers when you try and read its thoughts. That's a really good way of punishing that, because normally you can just read anyone's thoughts with something like a Detect Thoughts spell. Great, I do genuinely like this feature, that's cool. It then has this Whispering Blade, which has a DC 20 Whiz save, or you can't speak until the start of the Corruptor's next turn. I think that the only thing that turns off, like really turns off, is vocal component spells, but if you want to properly roleplay this, which I think it's intended to be properly roleplayed, you would also not be able to share information, which, I mean, information blockers, those are cool. Debilitating Touch then is a paralyze, but it is only for 1 turn, and it is also immune after you've been affected by it. Great, I do not mind that at all. The legendary actions are, it runs away, it stabs you and stops you from talking, and it goes all small and squishy, and everyone takes a bit of damage. Yeah, that's alright. Okay, we now have the Hierophant Medusa. This is a challenge 17 Medusa, and it's really just a lot better than the original one. Primarily because of the new Petrifying Gaze. This is now a bonus action recharge 4 to 6, rather than just being an always on sort of passive feature. And it's now a 30-foot cone DC 18 con save, which you don't have to make if you're blinded. You can also use your reaction to just give yourself the blinded condition and just ignore this entire effect. That's great. Anyway, if you fail the save by 5 or more, you're just immediately petrified. Otherwise, you take a bit of damage and then become restrained and make another saving throw on your next turn or become petrified. This is so much better than the original one. On that one, you just kind of basically spent the entire game blinded or making constant saving throws, and it just wasn't very fun, to be honest. This is a lot better. Other things that it has, it's got some grapple attacks, it's got a ranged attack now, it's got Blade Barrier, which is an interesting spell, and it also has Greater Restoration, so if you fight it into submission, it can then revive whoever it petrified. That's cool. Finally, it's got this Final Blade feature, which is basically a Vorpal sword. That's it's interesting. If you crit, then it immediately kills you. If you fail a save, that is. It's alright, I don't mind that actually. The only other thing that it has is these legendary actions. These two aren't very interesting, they're just making attacks. I do want to mention move though, because I'm noticing that almost every legendary action that I've seen has at least one option for just moving away without provoking opportunity attacks. I don't mind that, that's pretty good. Frost Giant Ice Shaper. This is another one of these ones with the runes, and I quite like these features. These give you something that you can steal or that you can directly attack to weaken it. And that's pretty cool, I like that. This one gives it two features. One is basically the shield spell crossed with Armour of Agathis, which, I mean, yeah, I want to take that away. And the other one is it has the ability to summon, like, super buffed Winter Wolves, which, yeah, that's alright. Winter Wolves, if they get a +6 bonus to attack and damage rolls. That's not bad at all. A Winter Wolf stat block is alright. Other features that it gets are just some Great Axe attacks and sort of Ray of Frost but better. Yeah, it's alright. But yeah, this is a non-terrible Frost Giant. Okay. The Bear Noloth is next, and this one has a really cool feature in this Miasma of Discord. It's a 120-foot range, 20-foot radius sphere. Make a DC 19 Wiz save. If you fail, you take a bit of damage and then you are charmed for a turn. But it's a really special kind of charm because when you're charmed like this, you treat allies as foes. Basically, this is a one turn you have to attack your friends. That is so cool. It's really fun to sort of roleplay this stuff. So yeah, really like that feature. Other stuff it has is it's got a healing turn off, it's got just some general attacks, it's got a summon other Yugoloth, that's alright, I can deal with that. And then as part of its multi-attack, it can just teleport 120 feet. That means that it's really hard to pin this guy down. Yeah, like it. This is another one with 3 reactions per round, only once per turn, instead of legendary actions. I've heard that they were doing this. I've not actually seen that many instances of it, and I have seen quite a few instances of legendary actions. So I don't know whether this... I don't think it's trying to replace legendary actions, let's say that. Anyway, it's got 2 of these. It's got Afflict Despair. This is basically when you attack it or succeed on a saving throw, re-roll it, it's Silvery Barbs. And then it's also got a sort of a Hellish Rebuke, I guess. So yeah, Silvery Barbs or Hellish Rebuke 3 times a turn. That is really good. It can even do it on this Miasma of Discord charm effect. So yeah, I like this guy a lot. We now have Mala29. This is a named creature, a Yugoloth, and the only reason I'm talking about it is so I can make that pun. This guy is just really boring. He throws a hammer which returns to his hand, woo! He restrains people with his whip, yay! And he's got this sort of... It's just a restrain AoE, it's all it is. It's just a lot of words to say that. He does have another movement legendary action though. I think I'm getting somewhere with this. Fire Giant Forge Caller. So this is another one with a fire rune. In this case the rune gives it +2 AC, so it's up to 20. I've mentioned a few times that I don't really like giving monsters 20 AC. I guess CR 18 it's probably alright, but I still don't like doing it. I like my players to hit my monsters. And the other thing that it gives it is this Magma Wave, which honestly just looks badly written to me. So this thing emits a wave of magma, and then you're restrained in the rock. But it doesn't say that you're restrained in the rock until like down here, and it doesn't do any persistent damage or anything. I would have thought that if it's magma that then cools and restrains you, then you still probably take some persistent damage from it or something. It's a very weird feature, this. I'm not too keen on it. Other things it has are it has a throw rock. Again, it's got this ammunition thing, and it's got this forge hammer, which basically does heat metal every single turn. That's quite hard. Okay, we now have Uriale the Medusa. If you know why that kills me, you know why that kills me, but I'm not going to go into Greek mythology right now. So, this here, Uriale the Medusa, also has that petrifying gaze from before. Again, I really like this feature, although in this case she has lesser restoration, not greater restoration, so she can't heal people that she petrifies. Not so fond of that. Other than that though, I mean, she's got a grapple, she's got a poison. There's nothing especially interesting here, to be honest. She does have a pair of sending stones with Asteria for some reason. I'm not entirely sure about that. I mean, I know that Asteria has a stat block somewhere, so I guess we'll find out then. Right, Asteria is literally the next stat block, and it says here that she draws much of her power from her bond with Uriale. So I said that I wasn't gonna do any Greek history. Yeah, I'm gonna do some Greek history now. So there are a few different figures called Uriale and Asteria in Greek mythology, but the most famous ones are Uriale the Gorgon, the elder sister of Medusa, and Asteria the Titan, who is the mother of Hecate, goddess of witchcraft. As far as I can tell, they have absolutely nothing to do with each other. They aren't even related. The Gorgon sisters come a few generations down and much inbreeding from Gaia, but Asteria is all the way over here. So clearly the Uriale and Asteria who are friends are not these Uriale and Asteria. There are a few different figures which have some slight overlaps, but nothing especially significant. One of the Amazons that Heracles fought was called Asteria according to Diodorus Siculus, and then in a completely different account by Valerius Flaccus in the Argonautica, he mentions an Amazon named Uriale. They don't have any relation to each other and are from completely different sources, but I guess they are at least both Amazons. The last connection that I can find is in relation to King Minos, the guy with the labyrinth and the Minotaur. His daughter was called Uriale, and this Uriale is probably also the mother of Orion? Anyway, every 9 years, King Minos would demand 7 boys and 7 girls were sacrificed and eaten by the Minotaur, who incidentally might also be his son. There is a vase which depicts one set of these sacrifices and includes a maiden who is labelled Asteria. So basically, the link here would be that some girl from Athens was eaten by a monster which might have been a random woman's brother. That doesn't sound like it's Friends territory to me. I have no idea what the mythological basis for saying that Asteria and Uriale are friends is. Obviously there doesn't need to be a reason, it's the Forgotten Realms, not Greece, but I do have a theory as to why this friendship was specifically called out, and it's really dumb. I think that someone in the WotC office half misremembered some random Fate Grand Order lore. In Fate, the Gorgon Euryale and the Minotaur Asterios are friends. That's probably in itself a misunderstanding of the fact that the Gorgon and Minos's daughter are completely different people. I reckon that someone at WotC saw that there were two high CR monsters called Euryale and Asteria, vaguely remembered that thing from Fate, and then decided to copy it. So my ultimate verdict on this random throwaway line in the lore is that it makes no sense, and why doesn't Euryale have a feature that lets her scream really loudly? Incidentally, if any of you are really interested in researching some cool Greek myths, I highly recommend Medea. She's probably my favourite historic figure that side of Cleopatra VII. Anyways, back to your regularly scheduled me getting increasingly exasperated by the ungodly number of giant clones. Right, now that we've all had some fun learning about the history of Euryale and Asteria, and why they make no sense to be friends, let's have a look at Asteria's actual stat block. So she's very clearly designed to be a high-level NPC that the party sort of fights with, some kind of ally. She has this Guardian Aura feature, which is basically just everyone within 30 feet of her has advantage on saving throws. If this was the direction that they wanted to go with the Paladin's Aura of Protection, maybe as a reaction give everyone around you advantage on a saving throw, that would be alright, I wouldn't mind that. Currently, Aura of Protection, way too strong, but this, not so bad if it required a reaction or something. Other features that she has, she's got wing boots so she can fly, okay. She's got this feature here which is quite interesting. Give one person half cover and immunity to frightened and advantage on attack rolls. Alright, yeah, I like that. She then has some general support spells. She's got Bless, Freedom of Movement, Greater Restoration, all good stuff, Revivify too. And other than that, it's just a few attacks. She does again have Legendary Action, Nimble Sprint, move up to her speed, don't provoke opportunity attacks. There's a massive focus here on making your really strong, powerful monsters have incredibly good movement. I like that. Adult Time Dragon is next, and the showstopper here is the Time Breath. I think that we've already seen this on the Young Time Dragon, but just to remind you all, a little bit of damage if you fail to save, and you are also magically weakened and desynchronized from the time stream. What this does is it gives it advantage on attack rolls against you, and you have the poison condition, which means that you have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. Bit weird for it to poison you, but I guess that's just a shorthand. Alright. What's really interesting about this though, is that it only ends if you succeed on 3 end of turn saves. That is different, and I quite like it. It's also got these 3 reactions per round, okay. This one gives it an attack, this one allows it to zero out someone's speed if they are currently slowed by a time breath, and this one gives it a reaction, teleport, and half damage. It's basically a Shadow Kai. Cloud Giant Destiny Gambler. This one is another one with runes. In this case it gets Counterspell, oh god, and it also gets this Thunderous Clap. This creates Heavy Obscurement, which is a nice effect, and it also does a bit of damage and prones people. Okay. Other than that, nothing going on. It's got a thrown weapon that returns, and it's got some fairly useless spells. This monster I'm going to try and pronounce as the Colliarut. I don't know if that's right. It has Unerring Blade. This is basically just sort of Battlemaster maneuvers, I guess. Nothing especially interesting here. What is interesting is this Edict of Blades. This is basically move up to its speed, in this case 50 feet, make an Unerring Blade attack against everyone it passes by, and also if it hits, the creature is incapacitated and every single spell of 5th level or lower just ends. It's Dispel Magic, Incapacitation, and also a bunch of attacks. That is, whoa, okay. Finally, it's got this Plane Shift. This is interesting because it can be used on an unwilling creature. Normally Plane Shift has to be on a willing creature. If it does use it on an unwilling creature, then it's a DC 18 Chas save, or you get sent to the Halls of Correspondence in Sigil. I know nothing about that lore, so I do not know how relevant this is. We now have the Gigant, and the thing that makes this really interesting is that it has absolutely no resistances or immunities at all. It's just completely blank over here. That is exceedingly rare on CR 20. Like, wow. What it does have though is spell-resistant carapace, so it has advantage on saving throws against spells, and you have disadvantage on spell attacks. Okay, that's a bit more fair. It also has this drone feature, which is a bonus action that it can do every single turn, DC 19 con save, or you take some damage and are incapacitated for a turn. And then it gets to fly a bit further. Oh my god, that is... whoa! That is very strong. I don't know about that. I guess that what you do against this is you give everyone deafen? So maybe you like stick in some earplugs or something? That could be interesting actually. Maybe I should actually use something like this. That could be fun. Anyway, other things that it has are this Scale Dust. This is a DC 19 con save, poison damage, and you become poisoned for an hour. No saving throws to get out of it, and while poisoned you can't regain hit points. That's... I don't know about that, to be honest. The Gigant also has a grapple which does persistent damage, and it's got a pull Talons attack. Okay. I think that the thing that is the most sort of threatening here is probably Scale Dust. Drone, if you give them like earplugs or something to get out of it, that could be fun. But Scale Dust, poison for an hour, no way out, and you can't regain hit points. Oh my god. The Veiled Presence is the last of these rogue card monsters. This one is for 17 to 20. This one has this Blade of Judgment attack, which is a DC 22 Charisma saving throw if you get hit, and if you fail, you basically have the Dazed condition from the playtest. I quite like the Dazed condition, this is good. It also has this Revelation, which is again a 1-turn paralyze and you're immune to it after the fact. Great, yeah, like this. Then I need to talk about these legendary actions because, okay. First up, it's got Flash Step, Teleport, and yeah, great. Okay, Teleport's good. Yes, like this. It's also got a Stab, 1 Blade of Judgment attack. Okay, yeah, I probably wouldn't use this one. And then it's got Searing Radiance. Okay, so it gets advantage on attack rolls, disadvantage on attack rolls against it. It's got Spirit Guardians. Hang on, mate. Why would you ever use anything other than this? What? These two are complete false options. Right, this is the last page, and before I actually look at any monsters, I just want to show you this. It's the Cradle of the Storm something or other. It's the Cradle of the Cloud something or other. It's the Cradle of the Fire something or other. It's the Scion of something. It's the Scion of something. It's the Scion of Why are there a billion different versions of this Cradle and this Scion? Like, come on guys, please. Give me some variety in monsters. I do not need 50 billion CR22 plus versions of the same thing but with a different element. Guys! Yeah, I am almost certainly cutting a good half of these, probably more, because I just don't want to bore you with every single one of these. I'm boring myself already. Okay, here's a big beast monster that actually isn't so boring. This is the Gargantua, and we're starting off with a Weird Aura, which is literally an aura of the Weird spell, except it's like it's slightly better than the Weird spell because the Weird spell is not good. It also has this spell mimicry once per day reaction, which I quite like. Whenever it sees somebody cast a spell of 5th level or lower, it can just copy it immediately. Yeah, that's cool. Other stuff that it has, it can teleport as a bonus action every single turn. Okay, yeah, teleport's good. It also has a different bonus action which gives the incapacitated condition for a turn. Not so sure about that because it's got no cooldown and nothing and And then it's got this rock, which is a thrown rock, as normal, except it doesn't have the ammo property, which... I thought that all of the Big B giants have the ammo property on their rocks. That's a bit weird. Final thing is this flick reaction. This is cool. If you attack it, then you get flicked away. You take a bunch of damage, and you get pushed horizontally up to 100 feet away, and you have the prone condition. Whoa, okay. So this is what I'm gonna call Ornozki. I don't know if that's right, but I'm gonna go with Ornozki. The only real reason that I'm bringing this guy up, because, I mean, it's fairly boring to be honest, is this heat regeneration. So this is a standard regeneration, turns off if it takes cold or radiant, although it is resistant to cold, so don't know about that guys. But it also turns off if the temperature is below 100 degrees Fahrenheit. For all of you normal people out there, that is about 38°C. Now given that I start to die if it goes above 25°C, yeah, this... I don't know about this kind of realm. I'm not going there, thanks. Right, I really should talk about one of this Cradle Scion pairings, and I'm going to talk about the Frost one, just because I think it's probably got the most going on. All of them have this Awakening of the Scion feature, and on some of them that is literally the only interesting thing about them. So, Cradle of the Frost Scion. This one has 5 legendary resistances, which is more than most monsters. It's also got 20 AC, 499 HP, and I mean, it's got some good saves. Except for its dex, actually. Its dex save is kind of trash. But yeah, overall, very high defenses, pretty much all round, magic resistance as well. Over here it's got a few interesting actions: Hurl Icicle, Thrown Weapon, Prone if you fail your strength save. Okay, I'll deal with that. Bonus action, Chilling Mist. It's an AoE, 86 damage if you fail your DC 19 con save, and if you do fail you can't use reactions. Cool, that is alright. Freezing Breath is the most interesting one. We saw this a while ago on, or well, something similar to this, on a monster that I did mention because it had a weakness, a vulnerability. I do not remember what that monster was called, but yeah. So, this one is a AoE, basically a breath weapon, 8d12 damage, and if you die to it, then you are petrified with 1 HP, but instead of being stone, you're frozen. And if you take bludgeoning damage, you immediately die. If you take fire damage, you come out of petrification. That is interesting. Yay, I like that. The only way that this has to do any bludgeoning damage is this slam attack, which I'm not so keen on having a you're petrified and then you get slammed, but if you have a turn in between for your wizard or something to just firebolt you, okay, I can deal with this. This is alright. Now, Awakening of the Scion. So when the Frost Scion, the Cradle of the Frost Scion goes down, it immediately turns into a Scion of Thrym. There is no downtime, it just goes straight from this monster to this monster. It's, I guess it's like, I've just turned Super Saiyan? I don't know. This one has 6 legendary resistances, so if you're counting, in order to beat this sort of 2-teaming monster, you have to burn through 11 legendary resistances with magic resistance. Oh my god. Anyway, the other feature that all of these have is the Scions of whatever all have bonus action earth-shaking movement. This basically says that it moves up to its speed, which is going to be 60 feet, and it then causes a 60-foot radius centered on itself. You need to make a con save or you lose concentration. It can do this every single turn. That is going to be hell to deal with. Oh my god. I mean, normally you optimize for doing a DC 10 Constitution saving throw. DC 25 is monstrous. Whoa. The other reason that I really quite like this guy actually is this Glacial Upheaval. This is just fun. It's a 30-foot radius, 100-foot high cylinder effect. Cylinders are interesting. It's a DC 25 dex save. If you fail, you take some bludgeoning damage. You take some cold damage. And then you get pushed vertically to the top of the cylinder. You're suddenly 100 feet up. Whoa. And then you just fall. So actually, this is 8d8 bludgeoning plus 3d12 bludgeoning plus 10d6 bludgeoning plus you're prone now plus next turn the ice that it just threw to the top of the world suddenly falls and everyone takes 4d8 bludgeoning and another 4d8 cold if they fail another dex save. Oh my god, this feature's insane. Whoa. Other than that, it's got a thrown weapon. This is basically the same thing that the Cradle of the Frost Scion had with its Hurl Icicle. Pretty much the same thing. And it's got an Ice Axe, and yeah. All of the other Scions and the Cradles are like this. You defeat one, they awaken, they turn into another guy who has a load of HP and a load more legendary resistances, and this earth-shaking movement. I'm not going to talk about all of them, because I don't need to. I've just talked about all of them already. Okay, Grim Champion of Desolation. So I think that this guy is actually a named monster, because over here it starts talking about Jin Corvus, who, I mean, that sounds like a name to me. I believe that there was another Grim Champion that I talked about a while ago, who is also probably a named monster, so and I just didn't notice. Because they're called Grim Champions for some reason. Anyway, multi-attack, Leeching Blade and Hollow Void. Leeching Blade, it heals when it damages you. Okay, only 10 HP, not a massive amount, sure. And then Hollow Void is a single target and it stuns you if you fail the saving throw. Given that it's single target and only once per turn, this is probably fine. Given that it's every turn, I don't know. I think it's probably fine though. Also, if it reduces anyone to 0 HP, it disintegrates them. So you're just immediately dead and you can't be revivified by almost anything except a 9th level spell. Yay! It also has this Step Into Nothing. This is a recharge 4 to 6 bonus action teleport that also turns it invisible. Sure, why not? Legendary actions. Fearsome Pursuit is a movement. Sure, we like those. Those are good. It also has a prone crush effect. Okay. And then it's got Nullify. Every spell of 5th level or lower ends on creatures and objects within 60-foot cone. Oh my god, whoa. Okay guys. Yeah, this is pretty good. I don't mind this guy at all. Hollow Void, you should probably be careful with, but other than that, this guy is pretty cool. So, that's 167 monsters, less however many I cut. Now for my findings. Well, unfortunately I got the expected outcome when it comes to weaknesses. Almost no monsters had a vulnerability or some other way of targeting them down, like I showed at the beginning with Silbix's Bridge and Akramar's Fragile Wings. Almost everything just encouraged you to use whatever your most powerful non-resisted attack was, and then to do it again. Of the 167 total monsters, only 2 had an actual vulnerability in their stat block. Next up, there are a lot of monsters which I consider to have oppressive effects. By that I mean things that will essentially remove one or more party members from the game. This could be from stuns, incapacitation, banishment, any of the detention drones, and I'm even including the Hexaton Modron with its 3 counterspells per turn, 4 legendary resistances, and at-will dispel magic. In total, I counted 48 monsters with these oppressive features, which is a little over 1/4 of the monsters I looked at. They also seem to be incredibly protective of the beast creature type. Of the 167 monsters I looked at, there were a grand total of 2 beasts, both in Glory of Giants. There were a number of monsters that would have previously been beasts, like dinosaurs and the giant lynx or giant ox, Well, they were all either monstrosities or fey. I think it's highly likely that a lot of the wild shape and polymorph targets will be leaving the beast type in the new monster manuals. Whilst I'm talking about the giant lynx, I noticed that they seem to be moving more features out of the abilities section and into the actions section. For example, in the PHP, the panther has the Pounce feature. The giant lynx doesn't have that, but instead its claws action has the effect of Pounce built in. Another thing with attacks is that a huge number of monsters have some way to do non-bludgeoning, piercing and slashing damage. In total, 131 of the 167 can do some other damage type. Frequently this is in the form of an attack which does something like 3d8 plus 7 piercing damage and another 2d10 fire damage. This is potentially a problem for barbarians, because unless you're a bear totem, your rate will be less effective than expected. On to positive notes. Almost every legendary creature has either a teleport or a move without opportunity attacks as a legendary action. I think that's absolutely excellent. Having a wave of bosses to reposition is incredibly tactically important. Whilst it's not a legendary creature, I want to specifically call out the Transcendent Order Conduit with its Don't Be There reaction. That one is outstanding. On the subject of reactions, the idea that legendary actions are being replaced by additional reactions is not true. It is simply an additional mechanic that they are playing around with. Both legendary actions and multiple reactions are coexisting. Finally, they are really taking into consideration the martial caster divide. I counted 30 monsters with either Dispel magic, Counterspell, a specific concentration breaking effect, or some other feature to frustrate spellcasters whilst not affecting martials at all. I'm not including legendary resistance or magic resistance in those numbers, and I'm also pretty certain that 30 is an undercount. Unfortunately, it's really hard to search through stat blocks for things that aren't specifically spells, conditions, and other keywords. Next, let's do some statistical analysis. So I've extracted a bunch of data about each monster and then done a load of calculations to get some pretty interesting findings. To start though, here's my population. I'm going to say that any CR with less than 4 monsters is going to be a limited dataset, and as such is unreliable. So for the next few graphs and charts, please be aware that anything below CR1 or above CR22, and also specifically CRs 16 and 19 are unreliable data points, so may produce outliers. Next, let's look at AC. On this and the next few scatter graphs, the yellow blob is the average, the blue line is the maximum, and the red line is the minimum. We can see that there is a general upwards trend, as would be expected, but it's fairly weak and there's a large amount of variance. In particular, we start encountering AC 20 monsters as early as CR4. We can also see that CRs 16 and 19 are probably specific outliers. We'll follow that up with a graph of HP. This one is actually fairly linear up until about CR20. There's a bit of a wobble at CRs 13 and 14, and CR19 is quite a bit higher than expected due to the sample size of 1, but other than that you could fairly easily draw a straight line on that graph and have it look okay. After CR20 though, HP numbers start to escalate rapidly. Now for a magic trick. We have AC and we have HP. With that we can calculate overall survivability. Let's say that we have a party of 4 baseline warlocks. Those are warlocks who start with 16 charisma, get +2 at 4 and 8, and just spam Eldritch Blast with Agonizing Blast and Hex. Against this party, how many rounds would you expect a monster to survive? Well, I plugged in the numbers and here we are. Right, let's cut off everything above CR20 and we'll also remove everything below CR3 just to make the trend a little bit clearer. It's a flat line. Like actually completely consistent right from CR3 to CR20. The target for all challenge ratings appears to be about 1.5 to 2 rounds of survivability. In my opinion, this is the single most interesting thing in this entire video. With the exception of high-end tactical games, almost every single DM I know complains about monster HP being too low. And some of my friends just flat out double everything. This right here is why. They're expecting a normal party to work through one monster every 1.5 to 2 rounds, assuming they are using no special tactics or high damage options. When you start adding in smites, fireballs, advantage generation, spirit guardians, bonus action attacks, bless, and all of the other crazy things that even a lightly optimized character can do, these monsters are probably going down in 1 turn each, and are likely spending that turn in a web spell. This graph is probably one of the main reasons why I started homebrewing monsters, although I've only just understood it for the first time right now. Now, let's bring back the rest of that data. Above CR20 it starts climbing rapidly. That seems reasonable actually, although I do think that even 4.5 rounds for your ultimate big boss is still kind of low. I guess in this case it would be the Cradle Scion tag teams though, so it's actually 9 rounds. That sounds a bit more like it. I could do something similar to this by looking at monster offenses, but that is a huge amount of work because each one will need a separate calculation, rather than just making one formula in Excel and copy pasting it down the entire list. Now a few things just for my interest. I wanted to look at monster sizes, just because I noticed that issue in Glory of Giants where everything was too big to fit on the battle map effectively, and sure enough, yes. Almost 3/4 of the monsters in Glory of Giants are huge or bigger. I guess given the context of the book, it's sort of to be expected, but I still think that that is absolutely terrible from a gameplay perspective. Huge creatures are really hard to position effectively on the battle map. Last part of the analysis, how many variants of bloody fire giant did I have to read? Well, apparently there are a grand total of 7 different ways of saying fire giant, but it's been corrupted. Those have then been replicated across all 6 giant elements, plus the Fomorian for some of them. Big B Presents Glory of Giants has absolutely destroyed any thoughts I had about including giants in my current campaign. I don't want to see another goddamn big dude with a club for a good 6 months. I don't really think that that's the goal that they had in mind when they were writing this book. There are a few guys that I do want to see again though. These are my top 5 monsters from the 3 books that I was looking through. In 5th place is the Hierophant Medusa from the Book of Many Things. This is mainly due to the honestly ridiculous level of improvement from the Monster Manual Medusa. The new Petrifying Gaze is much more gameplay friendly, and it knows both greater restoration and resurrection, allowing the DM to have it surrender at the end of the fight, and then revert the petrification or revive any party members that it managed to get during that fight. 4th place is a bit of a cheat because I'm including all 3 Demodands from Planescape. These were the fiends who could summon each other and worked really well together. The Chateau Demodand could turn its minions into liquids and then turn them back with a single action to ambush the party. Faratsu then gets to run up and grapple everybody to hold them in range of the Kelobar's Stinking Cloud effect. These 3 had great synergy and seemed like a lot of fun to run as a group. In 3rd place we have the Talon Beast from the Book of Many Things. This was the one with that awesome beak attack. Every time it hit, it had a chance of dispelling something that was affecting you, or if there was nothing to dispel, turning off one of your magic items. That's one of the best Mook ideas I've ever seen. 2nd place is of course the Grinning Cat from Glory of Giants. It's just the Cheshire Cat, like literally, it goes invisible, it teleports around, and it's got a big smile. This monster is really set up well to be a great social encounter. It's got a huge amount of cultural weight behind it, it's got a very tricksy skill set, and if you please it, the description says that it gives you its whiskers as a reward, which are basically Misty Step scrolls. And then, finally, in 1st place, the best monster of this entire trilogy of books, and making its way into my top 3 official monsters of all time, is the Harrow Hound from the Book of Many Things. This is probably the single best minion I've ever seen in D&D, and it's purely because of that supernatural tracker feature. It knows the distance and direction of any creature that has ever come within 30 feet of it, even if that creature is on a different plane. You can never escape from a Harrow Hound. Once it has your scent, it will always be able to find you. Any necromancer, dark lord, vampire, evil wizard, or whatever other BBEG you have should have at least a couple of these. With Harrow Hounds, you can make your party feel like they are never truly safe. And on that note, thanks for watching everyone. Hope you learned as much as I did. Do I recommend buying these books? Based exclusively on the monsters, Glory of Giants is an absolute no. The monsters are just too big to be useful, and a lot of them are also really repetitive. Planescape and Book of Many Things are pretty good though. If you do use WotC stat blocks, I could definitely see these being worthwhile purchases. I'd say that I probably slightly prefer Book of Many Things, but both are good. This has obviously been a much longer video than normal, so tell me what you thought of it. I could definitely do another similar video about magic items, and if you guys like this, I might do another monster review next year when the new Monster Manual is released. Subscribe if you want more Greek mythology lessons. Bye!